Hello everyone. Tonight I'm doing something a little bit different. Before we go further into the Faces of Loki, I decided that we might want to talk a little bit about UPG, what it is and is not, and PCPG and shared UPG, and what all those things entail, because a lot of the Faces of Loki videos will include UPG. Now, there is lore, and they will also have basis in the lore. So don't think this is all UPG, it is not. But I wanted to make sure before we go further, everyone kind of knows what it is not, because there is a lot of confusion apparently online about what is technically UPG, what is not, when do you need to put a UPG warning, etc. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight. And then tomorrow I will get our next Faces of Loki up. So let's go from there. Okay. So first of all, when we talk about different faiths and paths and paganism, and especially in Norse paganism and Austro, etc., there seems to be, in most cases, the different groups online, social media, even websites that are supposed to be experts, there seems to be a lot of issue with people trying to go to two extremes. There are some who want to go full lore, only lore, no room for UPG at all. And then there are those who want to go to the UPG is all that matters, lore doesn't, etc. So because of that, we're going to clear it up a bit. Start with the lore. That is simple. Lore is, as most of you should know by now, the stories and myths that go along with a particular pantheon of gods and their people, and the stories about them and who they are. That is the lore. You know, for the Norse, that would be such as the Eddas and the sagas. That is lore. UPG is unverified personal gnosis. That is your own personal beliefs and theories about the gods and things that happened in the stories that the lore themselves doesn't tell us. Now, that is not the same as a theory or a belief you have that is opposite of what the lore says. That is just your personal belief. It's not the same as calling it UPG. UPG is the stuff we are not told, where we have to fill in the gaps. For most of paganism, we know a lot of our stories were destroyed. They were, translated by people who had their own thoughts and opinions on what God should be. I will go ahead and clear up. Snorri was not a monk or a priest of any kind. He was a politician, which means, yes, he did have kind of, he was a bit there in the church's pocket, a little, if he was like the others of his time, but he was not a monk. He specifically said he wanted to share the stories of the people, regardless of the religion. So even though there may be some misinterpretation because of, his teachings that he had learned growing up, that does not mean that he himself was trying to make it Christian because he was a monk, because he wasn't. So there is that. Secondly, when we talk about the lore and the things that were changed or may have been changed. We also have to consider that we don't really know how they lived, and that if they were trying to be Christian, they would have very likely done what most Christians did at the time when taking over, which was completely erase them entirely, or specifically add their God to the story point blank. So this would be one of the few times they actually said, oh, this is, oh, these are these gods. They do tell the story in the introduction that they believe these were actual kings who came and told their stories, as in humans, that came and told their stories and how they began and pretended to be gods. Okay, may or may not be the case, whatever. Point being, these were the stories that they were told. And we look at those to see what the people followed, what the people had believed. They were shared by mouth. These were oral tales. And then Snorri and others decided when, book writing and printing became popular that, hey, let's write down these stories. And, well, actually, before that, they wrote down the stories. Snorri just translated it. So when I hear people say Snorri's Edda, he didn't write it. He was the translator of what was already written before him. So that's another thing to consider, is people try to use him being a Christian, etc., as why we can't trust it, when he did not write it. He translated what was already written. And it had been done before him as well. It's just he kind of compiled it in a different way for us. Either way, there are certain things written down. There are certain things that were lost. Some things that were just never mentioned because they probably didn't think it was important to mention. Those gaps in the stories are what UPG is for. So, to tell people, though, that they can't use UPG, you're failing to realize that without UPG, we would not be here. Not we as in not physically here, but the path would not have continued. A lot of what we have now is reconstruction and theories, things that have been put together by people who have read and interpreted the lore. People who have had to fill in the gaps, like, well, how do we handle this? Because it was not written down. Yes, we have gotten some bad results from that. We've also had some good ones. The point being, the path as a whole would not be here as it is without UPG, because there's a lot they don't tell us. So you cannot stick with just the lore, nothing but the lore, or you're going to have a lot of emptiness as far as the connection to the gods, how you pray, how you leave offerings. These are things that we're not actually told how to do. Okay? That's just, I'm sorry, there has to be a balance. You know me, I'm all about the balance. That is one example. It must go hand in hand. There are too many holes in the stories for us to lean on just that. Okay? Okay, so now that we've cleared that up, we'll talk about, again, UPG, unverified personal gnosis. So, when we have the stories, and there are things it does not tell us, UPG are the things we figure out for ourselves in our practice, in our experience, or even in our own thinking to fill in those gaps. So let me think of an example here. There are people who believe when Loki cut Sif's hair, that she hid in shame because she had lost her beautiful hair. And Thor just loved her hair so much, and she hid in shame. And the thing is, that is UPG. And I thought that at first too, before I went back and reread the stories themselves. We have to remember, when it comes to the lore and teaching as fact, that there are the myths, and then there are the retellings and novelizations, etc. Gaiman is great. He is not the lore. Okay, it's not the same. The problem we get from this is, if you do not state, I'm trying to think of how to put it, when you are sharing your UPG, if you do not tell people, this is my UPG, this is what I think happened, or so-and-so's version says this, then for newer people who have not been studying or not read the lore yet, they are thinking, because you've been here a while, that you're telling them what is right, and that is fact, that is what they should believe, because that is true, that's what the lore says, etc., when it is not. So, yeah. There are things in the books. We have Freya's cats. Everyone talks about their names or whatever. I don't even know, because I've not read that book. I've read the lore. The myths don't tell us their names. That was Paxton's version. Somewhat of a novel, so to speak. It was, retellings. And she gave them names. That's not in the lore. So if someone wants to believe they don't have any names, or if someone wants to believe that, she picks two random cats out of, a herd that she owns, I don't care, because the lore doesn't say. That is UPG, and there's nothing wrong with it. The problem is when you take your UPG and you tell people this is what it is, when it's not what it says. Now, it would be helpful if a lot of those people would actually go and read the lore and not find excuses not to, because it is in modern English now. The most complicated you're going to have is, some versions still have the more Old English with the occasional thee and thy, which is still rare. It's not that it's hard or complicated. It is simply English. I've had so many people argue about that. You can't read it. It's just too hard for me to read because it's so old. And okay, have you tried? Because if you actually read it, the difference that you're going to have is certain words that maybe aren't used anymore. It's the equivalent of reading a book from the 30s and someone saying to put the eggs in the icebox instead of the refrigerator. It's minor things like that. It's not something that makes it hard to read. It's nothing that is going to take away the context. It's just a matter of whatever, not trying for a lot of people. Then there are, again, the people who try to claim, oh, well, Snorri wrote it the way he wanted and blah, blah, blah. And, again, Snorri's at a... No. Again, he translated it. Even if it is, not necessarily what you agree with. Even if your personal belief does not follow along with what the lore says, you still have the responsibility to tell others when they are new and trying to learn that this is your personal belief and not actually what the lore says. And if you are the kind that has not actually read the lore or refuses to read it, then it is your responsibility to tell people that, because you do not have the right to tell them that your personal belief about it is the right way when they are asking what the lore says about a topic. Another one of those examples we get into with, one thing versus another. UPG is what we are not told in the lore. Okay? There are a lot of people who believe, say, the debate over whether Frigg and Freya are two different goddesses or one. A lot of people, oh, well, I believe that they're both the same and just different names at different times, whatever. Okay, well, here's the problem with that. That is your personal belief. That is not UPG. UPG is for what the lore does not tell us. If the lore tells us this thing, and you say, well, yeah, it says that, but I don't believe it, or you believe it even once you are shown, that is fine. You can believe what you want, but that is your personal belief. UPG is for the stuff we are not told. There's a difference between one's personal belief and UPG in that sense, okay? So, the lore actually says they are two different goddesses. It actually says Freya is second only to Frigg, so she is second place to herself? No. Then there are also cases where they are literally talking to each other. So your all-wise wives of Odin, or wife of Odin, if you believe it is one person, is sitting there just talking to herself, having a full conversation. Again, if you want to believe they are two different ones, that is fine. I'm not going to tell you what to believe and not to believe, but that is your personal belief, and that doesn't fall under UPG. That is, how do I put it? That is not what is covered in the path. That is your personal belief, and you need to tell people that. Now, at the same time, there are cases where UPG is really good because of the things we're not told. As in, for example, we have gods and goddesses talked about that we're given very little information about them. If it were not for UPG, we wouldn't know how to deal with them. We would not know how to approach them. We would not know how to properly honor them. As it is our UPG, our personal beliefs while working with them and trying to get to know them, that we come up with things they like and dislike. There are a lot of people who believe, like Sigyn, Loki's wife that lives over in Asgard. A lot of people believe she is very nurturing and loving and faithful and loyal and good for that. I can see how some people would believe that. But that is UPG. It's based on the fact that she holds the bowl to keep the venom off of him the best she can, and also the fact that her name means roughly the helper of victory, or really like girlfriend of victory is kind of like the best rough translation you're going to get. So she helps people get victory according to her name and etymology. So that's great. That is one more person we can go to and pray to. Some people don't necessarily hold that view. Some people wonder if she truly is loyal, where was she all this time, and why did she wait until her children were murdered to finally stand by Loki's side when they were threatening him to begin with? Why was she off living, in Asgard riding high when, the others were treated bad? Why did she stand there and keep her mouth shut? A lot of people have theories about why, but whatever the case, that's not loyalty if you're one of those people that view that way. That's, again, there's two different ways to look at it, but that is all UPG. And how we express or not express honor towards particular gods. How we work with them, how we deal with them, that comes from UPG. Because the lore does not tell us how we are supposed to do certain things. It does not tell us how we are supposed to pray. It does not tell us how we are supposed to make offerings. There are examples in the sagas of kings, chieftains, etc. making offerings, but they are usually in the context of something big that needs done. It's not like your everyday offering. There's a reason for it. It's, the equivalent of if we want something done and we go do a big offering and spell work and etc. because something major is happening in life. That's not the same as telling us how to properly do offerings, what they like, what they don't like. That is just how that particular king in that particular story did it. And that is another example of where the fighting, the infighting comes from. Where you have people who want to look at the lore and only the lore and not allow UPG, but yet they don't realize, like in that case, that was a particular type of offering, particular reasons, big events, not everyday prayer. So you have to make room for UPG for us to figure out how we want to do this. I know some people, for example, who their UPG, based on the lore, is where Odin made the oath to Loki. He would not drink from any table that would not welcome Loki. That became an issue later. Loki brought it up, and, again, at the feast, he was having his drinks. They said they didn't want him there, and Loki looked right at Odin and said, "You made an oath you would not partake from a table that wouldn't welcome me." And Odin knew he was right, so he told him, give him a seat. So, because of that story being so important in that particular tale especially, there are people who will not give an offering to Odin if they do not offer at least a little something for Loki, just to cover the bases. And then, so the issue we have is, on the other hand, we have the people who try to say you can't offer to Loki. You can't have him involved. Well, the problem with that is these are also people who try to claim lore as their only way. So, if Odin made the oath that he cannot, and this is what one of those people who do leave the offering for Loki told me their whole theory was, that if you offer to Odin and you say Loki is not welcome, then you are basically making it where Odin has to break an oath in order to get that offering from you. And that makes a lot of sense, because that is what the lore says. Now, The UPG part is that they leave it with every offering, just in case. You know, Lore says he could not go where Loki was not welcomed. So these people are like, okay, we're just gonna make sure he knows he's welcome, regardless. That's cool. But it's UPG, and again, it's UPG based on what the Lord does say and filling in the gaps about what it doesn't. Doesn't say how we make offerings. Does say Odin can't take something from a place that Loki's not welcome. Combination. Filling in the gaps. Now, personal beliefs that are not mentioned anywhere. Those do not fall under UPG. Just like if it is a belief directly against what or opposing what the lore says, but that's not UPG. Well, UPG is also not just any random personal experience that you have. That's just personal experience. It's not related to lore, UPG, set path, etc. It's just personal experience, personal belief, and that is fabulous. But you don't have to put a UPG warning on it. When people are posting, I think it's fabulous when people post online and say, okay, this is my UPG, or a question about UPG. But if it's just a personal experience that has nothing to do with the lore and the path itself, just your personal life and your personal practice, that's not really UPG. That's just your personal thing, so it really doesn't matter and doesn't need a warning. Just don't worry about that. Don't get so strict on it. I mean, that's my whole thing here is too many people get strict on one side or the other, or just hound it down. Again, I don't care what anyone believes. The point is, you don't tell other people that they can't believe what they do. So don't worry about that stuff. Example, someone saying, well, does anyone ever feel like this particular god likes this particular type of music? That's not really UPG. That's just a personal experience. That's your thing. Do it. If it makes you feel connected to that particular god, go for it. That's what we do. But the UPG part is, the things about the path itself. How do we do things? What does this mean? Those kinds of things. Again, like I said with singing, that's a goddess that people look to for nurturing and love and compassion and loyalty. That is UPG because it's not stated. Same time, lore people. People talking about, oh, well, we don't pray. The Norse didn't pray. Yes, they did. So I don't know where people... It's funny because the ones that claim to follow lore only are the ones that keep pushing that weird UPG that's not in there. We have people saying, oh, the Norse didn't pray. We don't pray to them. We don't, bow down, etc. We don't... Okay. Maybe we don't bow down and grovel. But here's the thing. Humbling yourself is not bad at all. It's the context it's been given. To humble yourself means you simply don't think you're better than everyone else. You understand that you are a person like anyone else. That it is okay if people are better than you. You do not get yourself on this high pedestal. That's what being humble means. But then you let certain paths, certain other religions, say that, humbling means just like bowing down and cowering, and it does not. It doesn't actually mean it even in their faith. That's just what some of their loudest members say. That is not being humble, that's just being a coward. So when someone says they want to bow and pray and humble themselves, there's nothing wrong with that. We should let that happen. At the same time, you saying that the Norse do not pray is total UPG, not actually UPG even. That's just total made up what you believe personally. Because again, UPG is for the stuff it doesn't tell us. You know what it does tell us? It tells us to pray. Very specifically. Very early on in the book. In the Prozetta. Ganglery is asking about what gods and goddesses there are in Asgard and who's in charge of things. And they tell him there's this god who is good to pray to for this, and there's this god who's good to pray to for that. Why would they tell you it is good to pray to them if they didn't pray? They didn't want you to pray. So that's an example of what is not lore and is not UPG. It's just flat out your personal belief. And that's what I mean about making sure you state the difference. UPG is important. Personal belief can be important. But when you tell people, if it's UPG, you tell them. If it's personal belief, you tell them. But don't get the two confused. They're not. Again, there are so many things we talk about that are similar but not interchangeable. That is one of them. We have... God. I'm sorry. This is why it's important. Because there are so many people who push UPG as if it is fact, and others that say lore and is the only way, and UPG can't be completed all, and there's all this infighting, and the infighting sucks, and you know why? Because then we can't fight the ones who are doing it wrong on purpose. Those who are using our path, our runes, our symbols for fucking hate. Because you know what? If you tell people that they have to go with lore only and no UPG, guess what? There's going to be a lot of Thorsmen running around smashing every Jotun follower they meet, because Thor went around smashing trolls. He literally went on hunting trips. Can't stop him because only lore. No. UPG comes into play. Then there's the UPG part of it. UPG matters, and doesn't matter if the lore says otherwise. This is it. Okay, you better tell people. At least acknowledge what the lore did say. And again, that is personal belief, not UPG. If the lore said something about it. Because if you're telling people that you have to accept UPG no matter what the lore says, then, as stupid as it is, the supremacist, UPG, is that they're better. Now, they too have mingled their personal beliefs in with what is sometimes viewed as UPG, but it's not. It's just personal belief, because it does say in the Eddas that all the religions, all the nationalities of the world knew Odin and prayed to him. And that's why he has so many different names. We've talked about this. The problem with being strictly one way or the other means it makes room for those assholes to keep running around doing what they want to do. Because, hey, if their UPG says that they can't associate with somebody because of blah, 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 well, you're the one who just said UPG is all that matters. Personal belief is all that matters. Doesn't matter what the lore says. So guess what? We have no way to fight them now. Because the only thing they will listen to is the lore, and you just said the lore doesn't matter. On top of that, if we're busy fighting each other over what is and is not the right way, which is why most of us left the other page to begin with, then we have no way to fight the bad guys. We do not have time or energy to fight the ones we need to stop the people that are making us look bad if we're too busy fighting each other over stupid technicalities. Okay? So, if you believe Sigyn is loyal and trusting and nurturing, and I believe that she waited until her children were murdered to finally stand by her man's side, cool. You believe what you want, I believe what I want. As long as we don't tell each other, you have to believe my way. Okay? That's how we do this, because at the end of the day, if we're all too busy fighting each other, how are we going to do that? So, you think she's loyal? I think she's not. But you know what we both think? That those little supremacist assholes over there need to stop telling people who can and cannot pray to Odin or, be part of the practice. And we need to work together to tell them to shut the hell up. So that's why it matters. At the same time, again, you have to just let people know. I don't care what you believe, just let people know what it is. If it is from the lore, let them know. If they are asking about the lore and you tell them your UPG, make sure you tell them it is your UPG, not what the lore says. Because the new ones need to know both. They need to know your UPG and how you came about getting that UPG, but they also need to know what the lore actually says. Because if they don't, if they are given one or the other and get confused, then that leaves more reason for them to believe whatever someone else, because those guys we don't like. They look for anyone who mentions the word Norse or Odin or sees a rune. They look for these things so that they can come and go, let me tell you. They proselytize a lot. They will look for anyone that has any sign that they might even enjoy learning about the Norse, and guess what? They will jump on it. And if we are not giving them the tools they need, letting them know what the lore does actually say, letting them know, what we've come to believe based on both experience and lore combined, then they're going to be open to be given a lot of fucked up information that's not right. So tell them where to read the lore. Make sure they do. That's a whole nother topic we'll talk about later, because there's a difference between following an actual path and just following the gods that are in that path, okay? Another topic. But the reason it is important to know the difference and how they work together is to keep to keep the path growing, but in the right way, in the right direction. Because we don't want new people coming and not knowing where to get the information. We don't want them taught solely UPG and then not know how to combat the assholes. We don't want them to not know how to speak up for themselves or for the Norse path as a whole because they were told nothing but UPG. Same time, we don't want them to look only at that and not accept UPG because then they become just as gatekeepy as the others, just maybe in a different way. So it's important to balance the both. Now, one more thing is, we still have a little bit here, PCPG and shared UPG. So shared UPG is simple. We have our own personal UPG that we have come up with for whatever reasons. And then, we share that with others. And then someone reads it and goes, oh, you know what? I really like that. I kind of agree with that. I'll take that too. That is shared UPG. Okay? So, example, a lot of people associate cinnamon with Loki. It's an offering he likes because it's kind of sweet, but it's kind of spicy. It's kind of has his personality in it. There's a belief that he likes mulling spices. Let me see. He likes little trinkets. A lot of people think he likes chocolate. This is all shared UPG because it was stuff that one or two people might have thought it, and then when they're sharing, oh well, I do this, and someone says, oh well, I like that idea, I think I'll adopt it too. That is shared UPG. PCPG is personal. I'm stuck on the other one. PCPG is peer collaborated personal gnosis. That is where multiple people who have never met or communicated get the same UPG and without hearing it from others as well. So it's not like they went online and they saw this thing and go, ooh, I like that. I like that idea. No, it is, say, I'm sitting here and in my personal experience and relations, I get an idea that Loki likes or does this certain thing. Another person that I have never met that is on the other side of the world goes and has the same exact experience and belief from their personal experience. Someone else over in another country, same thing. And then when we are all talking, people come together and when you're online and one of the three of us says, hey, well, I had this experience multiple times and this is my personal UPG, this is what happened in my experience, and then those two pop on and go, oh my god, I had the same exact thing. That is when it becomes peer collaborated, because what the difference between shared and peer collaborated is, shared is where it was shared. You heard it, you've seen it, it's been out there. The peer collaborated is when people have had no other connection, no other thoughts, not been told about it, and suddenly multiple people have the same exact idea even though they've never heard it before and they never came in contact with each other or anyone else who had that thought, yet they all got the same idea, so therefore there must be something to it. That is the difference. So PCPG would be more, Loki is very often associated with fire. He is a fiery god in some people's minds. He is associated with fire. We don't have exactly a lot of lore, although there's bits and pieces here and there that mention fire around him. But most followers have had some form of experience or feeling UPG that pops in that, oh, he's related to fire. And that becomes peer collaborated because it's just a thing that happens. Now, again, chocolate being a offering. That one's kind of a borderline because, that's one of those things a lot of people had the idea, the same thought, never knew it, and then suddenly we're online like, oh my god, I had the same thing happen to me, and then everyone's sharing how it happened to them, not just, oh, I heard someone say it. Like, oh yeah, me, I was preparing offerings one day, and I hear this voice, I want chocolate milk. Okay, that seems really odd, but I'll do it. And I take it out, and then I hear this little voice as I'm walking away that's like, it's an aphrodisiac, right? And then someone else says like, for some reason he just wanted Hershey Kisses. He wanted chocolate. And I was like, oh, I had an experience very much like that. This is what happened in my case. And this was, I had the same thing. That could be counted as peer collaborated, even though it is odd. Then again, it's Loki. But it counts as peer collaborated because these are people who had not heard about that, who had never thought about it, thought it was weird when they first got the message. And then all of a sudden, there's these multiple people who all had the same experience of like, really? You want chocolate? Okay. That's peer collaborated. It's not the same as shared because they hadn't heard it before they did it. The peer collaborated is when you have the thought and the idea before you've seen or heard about it. And others had the same idea. Shared is more like someone says, I believe Loki kind of does this certain thing. And we're like, oh yeah, I can see that. And, I'll start doing that too. Or Loki likes it when I do this particular type of meditation or this particular type of offering. I thought I'd try it and he seemed to like it. And everyone was like, oh, I think I'll try that too. That's shared. It's not quite the same as peer collaborated, but they work hand in hand. So there is that. So that is what these things mean in the way that my brain loops from one to the other, and I'm sorry about that. But the point being, we don't need to have one or the other. We have to have some kind of balance between the lore and the UPG. At the same time, we cannot discount and have the infighting one way or the other. If you don't believe my UPG, that is okay, as long as it's not involving hurting people or hate or bigotry, intolerance, etc. We're cool. As long as you're not telling others they have to do it. If you're not telling others how they have to practice. At the same time, if you want to be free to practice as you wish, and based on your UPG, etc., then you have to make sure you point out when it is UPG and when it is not. Because when a new person comes on and says they want to know what the lore says about such and such, or what does the path say about such and such, they're not asking for personal opinions. They're asking what the path or the lore says. So you can say, the lore says this, but I believe this. Do not say, I believe this, and give them some kind of UPG and act as if it is lore. Okay? Because that's not what they're asking. They need to know the lore and be given the ability to find their own way the way we did. Okay? And when people go, they want the lore and only the lore, and you can't have UPG, and there's one way only. Okay, I don't care if you're talking about the lore or the UPG. If you are trying to tell people that your way is the way, that they are wrong for believing their way, again, except for cases of hate, etc. If you're doing that to people, then you are no better than the religions you claim to have left because of the one true way. And I don't see how you can't see that. Okay, so, yes, we are not a book religion, but we do have lore. Again, a lot of people call us the religion with the homework, because we have a lot to read, a lot to study, a lot to look into. That doesn't mean you can't make your own personal beliefs about how it operates and interpret it, But you also have to keep in mind the difference between what the lore says and how later interpreters claimed it meant. Because that is the biggest hang-up we have when it comes to that, is people who took the lore years ago, and not necessarily the people who translated it like Snorri, but the people who interpreted what he translated, said that it meant something else based on their Christian belief or whatever, and then they taught that as if it was what the lore actually said. It's not what it said, that was their interpretation of it, but there are now so many people who simply won't read it, or who read it with the mindset of knowing it's gonna mean this. Jotun folk, we know this, because, people are like, oh, well, they've got this too much Christianized, God versus Satan thing between Odin and Loki and Asgard and Jotunheim, and no, they don't. If you read it like you would any novel, without first thinking of what it's gonna mean based on what other people told you, just read it like a book. Don't expect anyone to be a certain way. And you'll see that there's a lot different. It's not actually outright saying this is a big major battle. It doesn't say, oh, Ragnarok is evil. It's just that they're trying to stop it. Who wouldn't want to stop what's going to kill them? It's not about good and evil. That's interpretation that we just got pounded into our heads. So you do need to read all the myths and lore and sagas and etc. Read into it like you would any book. Like if you went to the store and picked up a fiction novel and you were reading it and you decide whether or not you think the guy in the book is the good guy or the bad guy based on your view. If you do that with the lore, you'll see that it doesn't actually point blank say good versus evil. That was just an interpretation that has been pushed on us. And the reason I'm making sure to say this, even though I'm going way over the time I meant to, is because people use that as an excuse to not read it. But if you're not following the lore, or what it actually says, and what, was done by those before us, then you're not following the Norse path. You're not Norse pagan. You're not Locan. You're not Rokatru. You're not heathen. You're just a pagan who happens to prefer Norse deities. Which is fine and okay. But you need to say that. Because we have to have that backup right now, especially because there are others who do not want us to have the same rights they have when it comes to religion. So if you're out there saying that you are this path but doing this that is opposite what it says, part of the excuse they give for us not getting the same rights or not being a real religion, as they try to say, is because we don't have a set path to follow, rules, things, etc., like they do. When in reality, what we really have is people who take all their UPG, all their opinion, all their thoughts and experiences, and follow it and slap a name on it. And that is not quite the way it works either. Again, you can be whoever you want, you can believe whatever you want, but make sure you tell people where it came from. If it's personal UPG, say it. If it's in the lore, say it. If it's a combination of the two, say it. Because that is how we got here. That is how we got our whole extended, reconstructed, rebirthed path, as people call it. We got that from putting together these pieces from both the lore and the personal experience. And we combine those two and we get this one faith, this one path that is who we are. So if we start infighting over the two things that made us what we are, then what do we have left? You know, we've come too far. We're finally accepted legally. And people are still trying to stop that and go back to not letting us be accepted anymore. So the last thing we need is to have people fighting over discrepancies and technicalities. So say what it is, because at the end of the day, you want people to be able to know where we're coming from. Where you're coming from. Don't you want them to understand you and who you are and where you're coming from, as opposed to thinking that you just randomly made up stuff like the Christian said you did? Come on, give them some substance, you know? Give them something to go, okay, that makes sense. Let them know that we actually study, that we actually do practice and study and experience and grow, and it's not just, I want to do this because I do. That's what a lot of them think. They think that we only do this because we're trying to be different. So the best thing for us to do is not fight each other and do what we've always done, which is combine the two. Combine the writings with the personal to get what we are, who we are, and keep growing. Because ultimately that's how we got a path to begin with. We wouldn't have it now if those before us hadn't done that. So, I'm sorry. I got really personal there for a minute. Didn't want to. Didn't mean to. I did not mean to take this long, but it went a lot further than I wanted, and I do apologize. Either way, tomorrow I will try to do my Faces of Loki finally, but I just wanted to make sure we all knew kind of the difference. UPG, Lore, PCPG, and what all that entails before going further, because a lot of it does combine. Both sides will be involved in the Faces of Loki, and I just needed everyone to know and be clear what that means going forward. So, hope you all have a good night. Again, sorry I took longer than expected, and you all. See you soon. Have a good night.